A sudden, desperate howl shattered the storm's fury as Emily realized Buddy, the injured bear who never left her side, had vanished into the raging night. Poachers lurked nearby, hunting something far more dangerous than she imagined, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Emily Johnson had always been drawn to solitude, a quiet so profound it swallowed the relentless clamor of city life and left only the whisper of trees and the rhythm of her own breath. Her latest retreat, a weathered cabin nestled deep within the Appalachian wilderness, promised a sanctuary for both her fraying nerves and the novel she had stalled on for months. The dense forest around her was a fortress of green and shadow, where sunlight spilled in hesitant patches through the towering oaks and maples, and the air carried the rich scent of pine and earth. This was a world where time slowed, the frantic pulse of deadlines faded, and inspiration could trickle back in. On a late afternoon, colored with the golden hues of descending light, Emily stepped beyond the cabin's creaking porch to gather firewood. Each snap of a twig beneath her boots echoed in the quiet, a small intrusion on the forest's calm. But then a faint whimper, a sound so fragile and raw it immediately pulled at something deep inside her, caught her attention. It was almost imperceptible, blending with the rustling leaves and distant bird calls, yet unmistakably desperate. Guided by the plaintive noise, Emily moved cautiously through thick underbrush until she spotted the source. There, tangled cruelly in a rusty steel trap, lay a massive bear cub, his tawny fur matted with grime and streaked with blood from the wounds the iron jaws had inflicted. His eyes, wide with terror and pain, met hers, igniting a surge of compassion that burned away any flicker of fear. She recognized the brutal handiwork of poachers, men who saw the forest as a resource to exploit, not a home to protect. Without hesitation, Emily knelt beside the struggling animal, her hands trembling but steady. Drawing from the small first-aid kit she'd packed, more for minor scrapes than something like this, she worked quickly, her fingers deft despite the urgency. She soaked a cloth in water, gently washing away the worst of the blood, then wrapped her own jacket around the cub's injured leg to stop the bleeding and provide warmth. The bear's whimpers softened, a fragile trust beginning to form between them. She named him Buddy, a word that felt both simple and profound, a promise of friendship in a place where survival often meant isolation. Emily knew the risks of bonding with a wild animal, especially one so young and vulnerable, but she couldn't turn away. Feeding him from what little food she had, she felt a swell of hope, convincing herself this was temporary, that soon Buddy would regain strength and return to the wild where he belonged. In that quiet moment, beneath the canopy of ancient trees, Emily wasn't just a writer searching for a story. She was a protector, a lifeline for a creature caught in a cruel trap, driven by something far larger than herself, the urgent, fierce compassion to save a life. Days slipped by like the slow drift of fog through the pines, and the initial fragile hope Emily had clung to, that Buddy would heal, then disappear back into the wild, began to waver under the weight of an unsettling truth. The bear cub did not leave. Instead, he lingered like a shadow at the edge of her world, his massive dark eyes fixed silently on her every movement, a silent sentinel whose presence grew heavier with each passing hour. By day, he roamed the perimeter of the cabin, cautious yet unyielding, pawing softly at the forest floor, but never venturing far from the porch where Emily often sat writing. By night, the cub curled himself against the weathered wood steps, his breath slow and steady in the cool air, a ghostly presence that disturbed the stillness of the forest rather than blending with it. Emily's delight, her conviction that she had saved a life, curdled into a mix of unease and restless worry. She watched Buddy with a careful eye, tracing the subtle shifts in his gaze, the way his body tensed at sudden sounds, the wary flicker in his ears that betrayed his growing awareness of the world beyond their fragile bond. It was clear he was no longer just a wild animal recovering from injury. He had chosen to stay, The cabin was no longer just a refuge for Emily. It had become Buddy's haven, too, a tether in a world that otherwise demanded wild, unyielding freedom. Ranger Tom arrived one morning with an expression that brooked no argument, his boots crunching firmly on the forest floor as he approached the cabin. His warnings were blunt, steeped in the harsh knowledge of years spent managing the delicate balance between humans and the wild. "A bear that gets too comfortable around people can become dangerous," he said, voice low but urgent. "They lose their fear, start associating humans with food or safety. That's when trouble starts, for you and the neighbors." He spoke of bears habituated to human presence, stories of destruction and heartbreak, of communities forced to choose between relocation or lethal measures. "This attachment Buddy's forming isn't natural. It's a risk you shouldn't underestimate." But when Emily looked into Buddy's eyes, those deep, expressive pools reflecting something more complex than animal instinct, she found not menace, but a quiet gratitude, a profound trust that seemed to transcend the typical boundaries of human and beast. It was a connection born not of dominance or control, but of mutual reliance and respect. She clung to that belief fiercely, even as doubt seeped in. Whispers began to thread through the nearby cabins and trails, a rising tide of suspicion and fear. Neighbors cast furtive glances toward her property, their conversations tight-lipped and urgent. The forest's peaceful sanctuary morphed into a charged arena where every rustle or distant growl sparked uneasy speculation. Emily sensed the fragile calm of her retreat fracturing, the invisible boundary between safety and danger shifting with every wary look exchanged in the woods. As the days unfolded, she found herself grappling with a profound question, gnawing beneath the surface. Had her act of compassion unleashed something she could no longer contain? One storm-racked evening, when the sky churned with rolling thunder and relentless sheets of rain lashed the forest like angry fists, Emily's world contracted into a tense, anxious silence. Buddy was gone. The space beside the cabin steps where he had slept, the soft indentation in the leaf-strewn ground where he had rested during the day, were suddenly empty, erased by absence. Panic knotted in her chest, cold and urgent. The night's fierce wind tore through the trees, as if mocking her helplessness. Had the poachers returned to finish what they'd started? Or had some lurking predator, wolves or mountain lions, claimed him in the dark? Every shadow seemed to stretch into a threat. Every distant snap or howl became a dirge. Her breath came fast, heart pounding a relentless drumbeat against ribs that felt suddenly too fragile to hold it all. A sharp, deliberate knock on the cabin door shattered the mounting dread before it could consume her entirely. She opened it to find Ranger Tom standing in the rain, his weathered face carved into a mask of grim determination, his eyes dark pools reflecting years of bitter knowledge. His presence was both a relief and a herald of unwelcome news. Without preamble, Tom's voice cut through the storm's roar, steady but heavy with a weight Emily hadn't anticipated. "Emily, there's something you need to know about Buddy. He's not just any cub." The words landed like cold stones. "He's the offspring of a rare, endangered species, one of the last of his kind. These poachers you're worried about, they're not just hunters, they're part of a black market trafficking ring that deals in animals like him. It's illegal, ruthless, and they'll stop at nothing to capture or kill him." Her mind reeled. The quiet bond she had nurtured suddenly felt fragile against a backdrop of ruthless greed and shadowy violence. The bear's persistent refusal to leave the cabin was no longer just a sign of injury or habit. It was a desperate, instinctual act of survival. Buddy was hiding, sensing danger that Emily had barely begun to understand. Tom's gaze hardened. "They're still out there, nearby. They know he's here. That's why he won't leave. This cabin is his refuge, and now it's a battleground." Emily's fear twisted into something sharper, more fierce. The serene wilderness she had sought as a retreat was now a crucible of conflict. Protecting Buddy was no longer an act of quiet compassion. It was a fight for life, hers and his. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil rising within her, a relentless tempest of fear, resolve, and the unyielding will to stand against a darkness she had never imagined. The forest, once taut with tension and shadowed by silent threats, began to breathe anew, each rustle of leaves whispering promises of renewal. The night air that had felt heavy with danger now carried a tentative lightness, as if the woods themselves exhaled a collective sigh of relief. Emily stood on the worn porch of her cabin, the dawn's pale light filtering through the canopy and casting a soft, dappled glow over the moss-carpeted earth. Beside her, Buddy stirred, his massive form sleek and strong, eyes bright, with the alertness of a creature no longer bound by pain or fear. The months of quiet vigilance and hidden battles had yielded to this fragile peace, a fragile alliance forged not by force, but by trust and understanding. Tom's arrival earlier had shifted the tides irrevocably. His steady presence, rooted in knowledge and unwavering resolve, had transformed the chaos into strategy. Together they had woven a plan both bold and meticulous, turning the hunters into the hunted. Emily remembered the hours spent poring over maps, marking hidden trap lines, and calculating risks, the sharp focus that honed her fear into purpose. Buddy had been more than a patient. He was an active participant, guiding the search with instincts sharpened by survival. When the authorities finally moved in, guided by the bear's silent lead, the poacher's grip on the forest was shattered. The arrests echoed through the woods like the breaking of chains. With the threat removed, the forest's wounds began to close, saplings pushing through fallen leaves, streams running clearer, the air thickening with the songs of returning birds. Wildlife officials, initially cautious, came to recognize the extraordinary bond between Emily and Buddy. Where others had seen only danger, they now saw a symbol, a living testament to resilience and unlikely friendship. The decision to allow Buddy to remain near the cabin, under careful watch, was unprecedented but fitting. This was no ordinary wild bear. He was a bridge between two worlds, a living emblem of survival entwined with human compassion. For Emily, the transformation ran deeper than the forest. Her experience, once a crucible of fear and determination, had become the seed of something greater. She poured her heart and soul into a novel that transcended the tale of a rescued bear, exploring the profound ways empathy can mend the fractures within and between us. Her words resonated, striking chords far beyond the forest's edge, touching readers who found in her story not just adventure, but a profound message of hope. The final, enduring truth emerged quietly but unmistakably. Sometimes salvation arrives not from grand gestures or heroic battles, but from the simplest acts of compassion. A wild bear who refused to leave, not out of menace or need, but out of loyalty. This was the miracle no one expected, the fragile yet unbreakable thread binding two unlikely souls together, a testament that in the wild heart of the forest and in the human spirit, hope could flourish against all odds.